Welcome to the series that takes you to the heart of America, where we give you the big picture of what actually makes this country work. My name is Yul Kwan. I've worked in many different fields, from law to government to business. I've even won the reality show Survivor. This is impressive. But in every part of my life, I've been fascinated by the same things: systems and networks. The sheer size of this thing is incredible. In this series, I'm going to explore the remarkable systems that move us, feed us, and make our economy hum. And how we put together the materials and manpower that keep this incredibly vast and complex country working day after day, hour by hour. Watermelons, picked this morning. In this episode, we'll explore how America puts food on its table. An industrial revolution has turned our prairies and pastures into the biggest, most productive, most efficient food machine the world has ever seen. If you think of our food industry as a giant factory that's designed to feed us, what you see down there is a factory floor. But even though each part has been carefully designed, the machine as a whole has not. It produces more than we can possibly eat. Excuse me. And it pushes resources to the limit.
Has the price of water been going up?
Yep, just like my taxes.
As demand keeps growing, the system is under pressure.
Well, you're not going to have pumpkins, you're not going to have apples, and you're not going to have cherries.
But Americans count on the food industry to deliver. This is a story of how that machine keeps us fed 365 days a year. This is America Revealed. America Revealed is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Imagine a portrait of America showing all the food we consume. Each dot you see here represents a single food outlet of a nationwide chain. This is Subway's 24,000-strong empire, rivaled by tens of thousands of McDonald's, Burger Kings, and Wendy's, complemented by KFC and Taco Bell, Papa John's, and Domino's. Fill out the national menu with IHOP, Dunkin' Donuts, and Starbucks, and you have just some of the brightest stars in our dining galaxy. If you'd rather cook at home, you can shop at over 3,000 supermarket chains and hundreds of thousands of independent grocery stores in the U.S. Or you can choose from bakeries, gourmet shops, and restaurants that dot our landscape from sea to shining sea. Now, here's the challenge. In order to feed us, every one of these outlets has to be supplied with food. This frenetic little dot is the delivery end of a vast and complicated machine. Literally, we put a GPS unit on a pizza delivery man and recorded his typical Friday night in the heart of New York City. This is Raju Hussain, and he works for Domino's. So how long does your shift usually last?
8 hours, 9 hours.
And how many pizzas do you usually deliver?
Oh, 30, 40 pizzas per night.
Wow.
I have one customer, they gave me $200 tip.
Wait, what?
I was like, wow.
Pizza is an edible snapshot of American food. It's fast, it's filling,
And for what you get, it's actually pretty cheap. Plus, it's completely customizable. You can get pretty much anything you want on top of the pizza.
This is the final stage of the Domino's food machine. But where does it begin? Pull back a bit. Each of these streaking blue lines is another Raju Hussain, riding each night through the streets of Manhattan in a kind of crazy bicycle ballet. Like all great performances, what makes this dance possible is what goes on behind the scenes. This is Manhattan. A daily supply line brings Domino's ingredients here from a supply chain center in Connecticut. That hub supplies all Domino's stores in the Northeast region. And Connecticut, in turn, gets fed with a constant stream of ingredients. Pizza dough, peppers, mushrooms, and tomatoes, often from clear across the country. All moved by satellite-tracked refrigerated trucks to distribution hubs spread across our landscape. And it's all perfectly coordinated so that Raju Hussain can deliver a pizza to your door, still hot and ready to eat. But the story behind this food delivery system is even more remarkable. From New York City, I've traveled 3,000 miles to the other end of the continent to find out where one of pizza's key ingredients comes from and how it's produced on such a monumental scale. This is California's Central Valley, and my guide is farmer Ted Sheely.
Ted, what are you growing out here?
We grow fresh market onions, wine grapes, pistachios, cotton, wheat. We grow about 1,600 acres of tomatoes.
How many pounds is that?
About 60 tons per acre.
That's a lot of tomatoes.
That's a lot of tomatoes.
Yes, the humble tomato, the foundation of pizza sauce. Ted and his fellow California tomato growers produce close to 13 million tons of them every year. That's nearly all the tomatoes America processes for foods like pizza sauce, ketchup, and salsa, as well as a third of those consumed by the entire world. Right up the road from Ted's farm, 500,000 tons of these red babies make their way through the state's processing plants every week. It's an industry worth an estimated $1.5 billion a year. But Ted doesn't just grow tomatoes. Like his neighbors, he produces an extraordinary variety of different crops. A staggering 50% of America's fruits and nuts are grown in California's Central Valley, what's effectively a giant open-air food factory powered by the sun.
What makes this a perfect place to grow are the terrific soils, bright sunshiny blue skies, temperatures that range 95 to 100 degrees during the summer, cooling down into the upper 60s at night. The only ingredient that Mother Nature didn't give us was the water.
But I'm looking around and water is everywhere. It's not coming from the skies. This is the Central Valley today. And this, in a rare aerial survey from the 1930s, shows the exact same valley as a barren desert, the valley's natural state. It takes a lot of water to make this desert bloom. And that water comes from far away, 400 miles to the north. It's hard to believe, but this is the same water Ted Sheely uses to irrigate his tomatoes in the state's hot, dry south. And he gets to use it because of this. California's Shasta Dam, completed in 1945.
The sheer size of this thing is incredible.
For California's food machine to work on the scale it does, it needs vast resources and monumental infrastructure. Right now, I'm flying over fine examples of both. It's giving me a bird's eye view of how America puts nature to work. To learn more, I'm meeting up with Shasta Dam guide, Sherry Harrell.
Shasta Dam is the keystone to the entire Central Valley project, and it makes it one of the leading producers of food and fiber for our entire country. Without it, buying a head of lettuce would be an incredibly big deal. We are actually now 428 feet from where we started up above, 174 feet above bedrock, and 67 feet past that concrete is Shasta Lake. There's over 450 feet of water behind that wall.
Wow. So if that wall disappears, you and I are swimming all the way down to Los Angeles.
A quick swim, too. Yes, absolutely.
Starting at Shasta with the Sacramento River, the Central Valley Project connects 20 dams and reservoirs through 500 miles of tunnels and canals, turning 42,000 square miles of desert into what is, in effect, the world's biggest greenhouse.
It's an extraordinary achievement in terms of technology and engineering and ambition. You realize how effectively and efficiently California has managed to maximize the one resource it never really had. What California has basically done is to turn dirt into pay dirt.
And to understand just how successful California's tomato crop is, all I have to do is head next door to Nevada.
These are California tomatoes. Just over 1 million of them. 150,000 pounds of beautiful, juicy, smelly tomatoes. And they've been placed here in the middle of Reno, Nevada, not so that the good people of this town can eat them, but so that they can throw them at each other. Welcome to the Reno Tomatina, the country's largest annual tomato fight. All the tomatoes here are surplus tomatoes donated from California. But rather than throwing them away, they've been put to good use. They're here to support cancer research. And everyone here has paid $10 for the privilege of getting hit in the face with a tomato. Oh. Excuse me.
This is just a fraction of California's tomato surplus, but that surplus is reliable enough to make the Reno Tomatina an annual institution. Over the last 50 years, the average American has come to enjoy a bounty of food never before imaginable. California's agricultural revolution is just one part of that story. This is another part, and an even more spectacular transformation. The Midwest. I've come in search of the quintessential American farm. And for me, that can only mean one place. Kansas.
Remember Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz? That's where Dorothy's from. That's her home. It's a natural world there that Dorothy wanted to get back to after being stuck in that artificial land of Oz. Well, I got news for you, Dorothy. If you saw Kansas today, you wouldn't recognize it.
To understand what's going on down there, I'll have to get a lot closer.
There's no place like home.
From up here, a dazzling pattern of circular fields stretches as far as the eye can see. There's a good reason for this cookie-cutter perfection.
What you're looking at is one of the greatest land transformations in American history. If you think of our food industry as a giant factory that's designed to feed us, what you see down there is a factory floor.
I'm dropping into Stone Acres, the model of a multi-million-dollar farm business. It's been owned by the Stone family for 4 generations. The ghost of Dorothy may be long gone, but at least Toto's still here.
Toto, where are you? Toto!
Along with the current owner, Greg Stone.
Yuli, you made it. How was your flight?
Nice to meet you, Greg.
This is a satellite image of Greg Stone's farm. Just one of Greg's circular fields occupies the site of his grandfather's entire 1930s homestead. This is an aerial photograph of that same landscape in 1937. A totally different world.
When Grandpa came here, there was absolutely nothing here. It was a barren prairie. He just pretty much started from zero. He had a few dollars in his pocket. The Great Depression had just kicked in, and then we had the dirty 30s, which was a terrible time. People tried to grow wheat for a cash grain crop, a little bit of feed for the animals, just whatever they could grow to survive. Anything, you know, weeds, tumbleweeds.
Tumbleweed.
Yeah.
What's the crop that you grow?
Thistles. Well, they used it to feed the animals, heat their homes, whatever.
And how successful was your grandfather in transforming this into a productive farm?
He was successful, but everything that he grew was basically for his family and a few head of livestock that he had. But nothing, you know, on the scale of what we have today, of course, where we feed thousands.
In fact, where his granddad harvested 20 bushels from each acre of land, Greg gets nearly 300. In the last 60 years, American farmers, on average, have tripled their yield, dwarfing the productivity of every previous generation.
What changed? Like, how did you get to the scale that you're at today?
Well, 2 things, irrigation and commercial fertilizer.
America's post-war chemical industry revolutionized farming by mass-producing key soil nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
When fertilizer became available, it was an immediate miracle drug to these crops. You could inject a small amount and quadruple your productivity without doing anything else.
And then came the water.
The late 1950s, the first irrigation wells were drilled in this part of the state. And Grandpa, he was one of the first in the area, though, to see that this was the future.
Greg's fields are circular because they're watered by one of the most powerful and efficient inventions in the history of farming: center pivot irrigation. There has always been water beneath these once dusty fields. They just couldn't get at it.
A couple hundred feet below where we stand here, we're sitting on one of the world's largest freshwater aquifers, the Ogallala.
But the Ogallala Aquifer was out of reach until after World War II, when they finally had engines powerful enough to pump that underground water spanning 174,000 square miles to the surface.
Fertilization and irrigation has changed the environment. It's changed the organic matter of these soils. It's improved everything.
It took just a couple of generations to go from Granddad's Dust Bowl subsistence to Greg's high-yield operation. And if you pull back even further, with the help of this satellite imagery, you can see thousands of farmers like Greg populating the Midwest with industrial-scale farms where once there were tiny individual homesteads. But this view from space doesn't show an even more dramatic change. Where Greg's granddad grew a variety of crops, 80% of these fields grow just one. A single species that has come to dominate the farming landscape and the American diet. At 322 million tons a year, we produce more of this one grain than anything else, making it the key ingredient of our food machine. Corn. Every time we go to the supermarket, though we might not know it, we're surrounded by corn. The average store has over 45,000 products on its shelves, and roughly a third of them are created using corn. Thanks to modern refining and processing, cornstarch can be broken down and reassembled as sweeteners, fillers, and additives to make, well, anything.
From cornflakes to cake mix, from Cheese Whiz to coffee whitener, from soup to canned fruit. In fact, the average American eats about 100 pounds of corn products every single year. And most of us don't even realize it. Take this chicken nugget. It's made up of 37 different ingredients. Want to guess how many come from corn? 30. Just look at the label of any processed meal, including the drink you wash it down with, and you'll find that corn is in almost everything.
And that includes this. If there's a single food that symbolizes the American diet for me, it's beef. I've always imagined cowboys and great herds of cattle grazing on the open prairie. Well, the cowboys are real, and they tend real cattle. But this is the modern-day prairie. Not a blade of grass in sight. This is a CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation, owned by JBS, the world's biggest meat company. At full capacity, it's a temporary home to more than 90,000 prime beef steers. To feed all these cattle, there's a huge factory right in the middle. It's processing industrial quantities of, you guessed it, corn.
The modern feedlot business is really an extension of the corn business.
Explaining the connection is facility manager Mike Thorne.
We take grain that wouldn't be very readily consumable by people and transform that into a marketable product in the form of finished beef.
So you're basically selling grain, except it tastes a lot better.
That's exactly right.
This vast quantity of corn makes it possible to produce beef on an industrial scale. Because an animal can be fed more corn, a low-cost source of calories, more efficiently here than on a traditional ranch.
This cattle's kind of new, still getting used to having humans around.
It's skittish.
Yeah.
New arrivals, like these one-year-olds, are still grass-fed. Because corn isn't the natural food for cows, it takes them a while to adjust to it. But soon, grass is phased out, and when the grain wagon comes around, it's like watching kids chase an ice cream truck.
So the idea is to try to fatten them up in the shortest amount of time as possible?
Basically, yeah.
How much do they weigh when they come in?
About 600 pounds.
600? And how much do they get up to by the time they get out of here?
1,300 average weight.
So they double their weight.
Right.
So I'm trying to imagine, I weigh about 155 right now, so in 6 months I'm gonna weigh 300 pounds.
It takes just 6 months to go from this to this. 2/3 of a ton of engineered beef steer.
What people don't know is that the fat gives it its flavor.
So when you're looking at the steer, like, how do you tell they're ready?
They're nice and rounded, everything's perfect, just looks like a nice meaty animal, but it's got that nice thin layer of fat that we want on them.
In order to satisfy our cravings for beef, nothing about these animals' lives has been left to chance. Conceived artificially from parents who never met. Injected with antibiotics to guard against disease. Their diet supplemented by growth hormones to maximize every calorie. What this guy sees is just another human. What I see is a new kind of animal. An animal bred and raised to meet the demands of the producer and the consumer. Just 5 miles up the road is a meatpacking plant. More than 5,000 head of cattle are funneled through this factory every single day. And this is just one of 632 plants in the U.S. Collectively, they process 34 million cows a year. Inside, there's a cacophony of blades and saws as an army of butchers dismembers hundreds of carcasses an hour.
About 100 years ago, Henry Ford perfected an industrial process to make cars cheap enough so that most Americans could afford them. And perhaps mass industrialization is the only way to make beef cheap enough so that Americans can afford that too. And where beef has led, pork and chicken have followed. Grain-fed, raised and processed on an industrial scale to give us what we want.
And the rest of the world wants it too. Companies like JBS export thousands of tons of meat around the planet. And we import what other nations' food machines produce. Every year, $86 billion worth of food enters our borders, like this lamb from Australia and New Zealand crossing the Pacific, and every variety of fruit and vegetable. This globalized food market means we can expect to eat what we want, when we want, regardless of season or distance from the food source. With all this choice, how do we decide what to eat?
The most important word in menu development is craveability.
Scott Allmendinger is a food writer and industry expert. Joel Fierman is a wholesale supplier here in New York City. As they know well, the food retailers study and shape our tastes.
30 years ago, restaurants were almost exclusively celebration food. This is our anniversary or somebody's birthday, and we'll go out and we'll have a big steak, and that will celebrate the occasion. The American public, through affluence, started to say, I like that food, I want that food, I crave that food, and over 30 years, the American public has started to eat more and more and more of the celebration foods as part of their daily diet.
But it's not just about satisfying our cravings. Food manufacturers are always coming up with new product ideas to stimulate appetites and demand.
In any industry, everybody's looking for that next big hit.
And you can create craveability with almost anything. Outback Steakhouse did it with one simple ingredient.
Perfect example is the bloomin' onion. You take an onion that has a price point of maybe 32 cents per pound, and you turn it into this product.
This is an onion?
That was a rather large onion that they've sliced and soaked in buttermilk and batter and deep fried and created into bloomin' onion. It sells quite a bit. It becomes a commodity. It becomes an item that the consumer wants.
When something like the bloomin' onion hits big, the impact is felt all the way back to its source. These are onion fields in Central California. Remember farmer Ted Sheely? In addition to all his other crops, he's an expert at producing bloomin' onions. 1,500 tons of them every year, precisely to his customers' specifications.
The bloomin' onion needs to be 3.5 inches in diameter, not larger, not smaller. If it's bigger than 3.5, it won't fit their cutting and cooking equipment. And if it's smaller than that, the customer feels cheated, and they're willing to pay extra to get that particular size onion.
With the bloomin' onion, the Outback Steakhouse has turned a common food item from mundane to money maker. And they're not the only ones.
It's turkey sausage wrapped in a pancake on a stick.
The food industry is in the business of creating desirable commodities. And we're in the business of eating a lot. The foods we crave are often high in fat and calories. That's an evolutionary survival tactic built into our genes. So it's not surprising that craveability usually means adding calories. The bloomin' onion, for example, has about 2,000 calories, roughly an entire day's worth for an adult. Over the last half-century, the food machine made it cheap and easy for us to put away an average of 600 additional calories per person per day.
And it really is a collaboration between the consumers who say, I like this, and the marketing people who say what size it should be. So now we all have woken up 30 years later and said, you know what, this really isn't sustainable. So what are we going to do about it?
I see Scott's point. Our expanding waistlines are a national wake-up call. He also makes me wonder how our food machine will be able to keep up with our growing, hungry population. Take Ted Shealy. To grow his onions, he has to maximize his water use in the resource-scarce Central Valley. California farmers already use 80% of the state's water. And the cost is going up.
It's become one of my largest cash burdens on my budget.
How expensive is water relative to other costs that you have?
Water's always at the highest. It'd
Really?
probably be over 50% of my budget.
Holy cow.
So, like most American farmers, Ted turns to technology to try and get the most out of every drop. He's installing a $50,000 moisture monitoring system to tell him precisely when to water his pistachio trees. And he uses a $2 million underground irrigation network for his tomatoes.
My business plan is, what do we do today to stay in business for next year? What am I going to have to do to be in business 5 years from now or 10 years from now? Water's the pivotal issue, and so I have to make it work.
And has the price of water been going up over the last few years?
Yep, just like my taxes.
It's getting harder and harder for farmers like Ted just to keep up with the food machine's relentless demand. As for our Kansas farmer, Greg Stone, his corn growing operation is under attack. The threat is so serious, he has to hire a professional to comb his fields every week. Because his multi-million-dollar business is a monoculture, a farm made up of a single crop, it's more vulnerable to invasion by a tiny killer.
This is where they bore into the ear shank, and you see the damage here. They could actually tunnel up into the ear, and then they lay their eggs, and then their larvae feed on the corn and complete the cycle. There he is.
That is a multi-billion-dollar corn pest right there in his hand.
This is a European corn borer.
Don't lose him, Eric.
I won't. This is a constant battle producers have to face year in and year out all the way through the Midwest. If you don't treat, you can lose significant yield.
So Greg calls in an airstrike. Robert Grace is one of 3,500 ag pilots in the U.S., an expert in the aerial deployment of bug-killing chemicals.
Ag flying is a different type of flying than virtually anything else because of the precision and closeness to the ground. We're typically 8 feet off the ground, traveling 120 to 150 miles an hour, using GPS navigation that will give us guidance to within about 1 or 2 feet.
Like Greg, Robert inherited a family business which has seen extraordinary change.
When my father started, they had a handful of chemicals, 1 or 2 or 3. Now, it's not unusual for us to have 40 or 50 products available because without that, the yields will suffer.
The pesticide industry has had to develop this wide-ranging chemical arsenal because the insects had their own secret weapon: evolution. Sooner or later, the pests evolve resistance to every new product.
Of course, no one's been happy about this. Certainly not the farmers. But caught between the need to keep producing and the increasing cost of a chemical arms race they couldn't win, they needed a game changer. So the food industry turned to a new technology based on genetics rather than chemistry, the genetically modified organism, better known as a GMO.
80% of Greg Stone's crop is now genetically modified, engineered to produce its own toxin that's lethal to insects like the European corn borer. So why do farmers like Greg still need ag pilots like Robert? This is a picture of Robert's work, recorded over a period of 2 weeks by a GPS unit we attached to his plane. He's still spraying, just not as much as before. Unfortunately, some corn borers are resistant to the toxin that the GM corn produces. Robert's job is to make sure those bugs don't take over the gene pool. Between the GM toxin and the pesticides, the system is working, at least for now. All this modern technology means farmers today produce vast quantities of crops. Now it's late September, harvest time. And farmers need a 21st century workhorse to get this enormous job done. I've come to get a hands-on lesson in modern farm machinery with specialist harvesting company Salmon's Adventures.
Hey, Roger.
Yo.
Whoa, these suckers are huge.
And its boss, Roger Salmons.
We're gonna teach you how to drive it today.
It's a little bit bigger than my Prius, but I'm game.
I'm about to take charge of $500,000 worth of brand new harvester.
Okay, now full throttle.
All right.
You are ready to rock and roll.
Hey, get out of my way. Woohoo!
In fact, Roger's happy to let me lead the pack. The whole wheat crop now depends on a rookie. Fortunately, this big rig has a lot under the hood. A 360 horsepower engine, automatic controls, moisture sensors, even an optional GPS guidance system. Roger's machine can harvest 8,000 bushels of wheat per day. 60 years ago, the average combine harvested less than a quarter of that.
Lift up on your header just a little bit.
Lift up on my who? On my header?
Plus sign, yep.
Plus sign.
Just, there you go.
Good.
Perfect.
But mastering these levers isn't all it takes to produce a harvest.
Oops. Oops. I'm gonna assist you here.
Yeah, no, please do.
Here's the bigger picture. Harvesting is a job on the go. These are the places where about a dozen harvester teams, including the Salmons, stopped to do their work last season. Tucked into their super efficient machines, each year, they crisscross the highways at the heart of America in a series of hectic mechanical migrations. Turns out, instead of harvesting their own crops, thousands of American farmers rely on the state-of-the-art equipment of specialists like the Salmons. By the end of October, Roger's team will have gathered 500,000 tons of grain and covered 5,000 weary miles.
You have to be able to thrive on stress in order to do this. A lot of people are coming for the experience. They want to see the heartland of the United States, but cabin fever sets in pretty fast. It really does. The odds are they're not going to come back next year.
So there's a lot of turnover in this business.
Oh, tremendous amount of turnover, yes.
Harvesting, like so many aspects of food production, relies heavily on people power combined with new technology. But sometimes, nature's way is the only option.
All right, take a look what we have right here. It's this beautiful honeybee inside this pumpkin plant. It's rolling around inside, sucking up the nectar, but while it's doing that, it's getting all this pollen all over its legs and the rest of its body. It's a beautiful sight, and it shows in action this delicate relationship between the honeybee and the flower itself that's absolutely critical to making sure that this turns into that.
Even high-tech farmers haven't come up with a better method for pollinating their produce. But there aren't enough wild honeybees to do the job. Enter long-distance bee trucker David Heckenberg.
We truck bees all over the United States. 1st of February is the big trucking trip to California to pollinate almonds.
California is the country's biggest producer of almonds. But they couldn't grow a single one without the work of beekeepers like David.
There's only 2 million hives of bees left in the United States. And it takes 1.5 million of them to pollinate the almond crop. Then the bees leave California and we truck the bees on to Georgia to the woods. to get some clean food into them.
David has to give them a kind of bee detox because the California almond trees have been treated with 7,000 tons of pesticides.
And then our next pollination is apples in Pennsylvania in the middle of April. Once the apples are over, these bees all go to Maine to pollinate blueberries. And then pumpkins start mid-July. These bees we're sitting here looking at, this is Friday. Went to Allentown, Pennsylvania last night and picked up 2 truckloads of bees and got home at 2:30 this morning, and here I am talking to you now.
By the end of their journey, David's bees have traveled 8,500 miles and pollinated an estimated 5,000 acres of America's produce. But these bees are facing a mysterious threat.
This hive of bees, it looks really good today, within a matter of 10 to 20 days, just disappears. There's nothing left. The bees are gone.
It was David Hackenberg who first alerted the world to a phenomenon called colony collapse disorder.
Are they dead?
It's a mystery. All that's left is the combs of honey. It's just like somebody took a sweeper and swept them all out of there.
Oh, so what's causing this?
We have a lot of scientists around the world working on it. We believe that it's environmental stress.
All the pesticides.
Pesticides. We have systemic pesticide in the seed, and it grows up through the plant to protect that plant. Some of that is getting in the flower.
Right.
And the bees are bringing that home, and then we see all kinds of weird things starting to happen. Don't swallow. Oh, I'm putting smoke in your... Sorry about that.
A lot of people agree with David's theory, but the scientific jury's still out on exactly what's causing colony collapse disorder. David doesn't know how bad this year will be, but long-term, the prospects aren't good.
Most of us guys that are in pollination business are losing 60 to 70% of our bees every year. So we've got big, huge fields, and there's not enough bees here to pollinate the crop.
Say colony collapse disorder keeps on happening and all the bees get wiped out. What does that mean? Like, what happens to all these crops?
Well, you're not going to have pumpkins, and you're not going to have apples, and you're not going to have cherries, and you're not going to have almonds, and you're not going to have a lot of things.
David's story is disturbing to me. If the bees are in trouble, so are the farmers who depend on them, and the consumers who want fresh produce. And it's clear the bees are not the only ones feeling the pressure. America's food machine is pushing all of our resources to the limit. From bees to water, to the people who make the system run. We rely on the nomadic lifestyles of harvesters and beekeepers, and tens of thousands of truckers moving products all around the country to keep our food machine running. Even those who don't travel for a living are rarely fixed, like ag pilot Robert Grace, or the JBS meat packers in Colorado, or Ted Shealy's tomato harvesters in California. It's estimated there are now 4 million agricultural workers who migrate from job to job across the continent.
But there's a real irony here. 10,000 years ago, people stopped chasing animals. They stopped hunting and gathering, and they started farming so that they could stay in one place. They didn't have to move. Yet look at us now. We can't stop moving.
One reason that ag workers have to cover so much ground is that these days, there are a lot fewer people available to do those jobs. A century ago, a third of us worked and lived on farms. Now, it's barely 2%. For the first time in human history, just 2% of the population can feed the other 98%. And a lot of farmers like Greg Stone will tell you that technology has made their work a lot easier.
The human element is becoming less and less of a factor. And that's good because it doesn't matter if the sun's up, down, or if it's cloudy, or if it's Sunday or Saturday. It has eliminated a lot of the need for skilled humans.
Sounds pretty different from what your grandpa did. I mean, would you consider yourself to be a farmer now?
Now I'd be more of an input-output manager. But I do wonder all the time, what would Grandpa think of this? You know, it'd be fun to see his reaction. So it'd be cool.
The original self-sufficient farmer, who laid the foundation for America's growth, has largely disappeared from the Midwest. But in some places, he's making a comeback. I've dragged myself out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning to help a man aptly named Will Gardner get his product to market.
Hey, what's up, man?
Will is one of thousands of small-scale farmers across the U.S. reviving the homestead ideal.
You don't want to get too close to the soil line because I want the growth to still continue. So I just chop it off right here. You know, it's pretty tasty, man. A lot of people at the market love it.
This is real back-to-basics farming, and some think part of a new green revolution.
How'd you get into this in the first place?
I just wanted to save money, you know, eat healthier. Figured it'd be a lot cheaper for me to grow the vegetables that we eat on a daily basis in my backyard. You know, simple stuff. And it just became addictive. They're very tasty.
Do you use any, like, pesticides?
No, just compost, man. So I put a lot of compost.
I should have asked you that before I stuck that in my mouth.
The amazing thing is, we're not in deepest rural Pennsylvania or even suburban New Jersey. This is where Will farms, the inner city of Detroit. Among its many problems, this area is a food desert, a place where it's hard to find groceries, let alone fresh produce. Although the surrounding neighborhood looks like an urban war zone, in fact, it's reverting to its rural state. This is an aerial photograph of the packed landscape of central Detroit 70 years ago, at the height of its industrial boom. As the city's economic fortunes decline, an estimated 44,000 lots of that land have been abandoned, quietly turning into green space, where 16,000 urban farmers, like Will, are now planting the seeds of an alternative agriculture.
It's a great feeling. I feel that I'm part of something big that's happening in the city. You know, it's more personal. People come down there and volunteer just to be able to connect with your farmer.
And that connection extends right into the heart of the city.
$4, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Eastern Market in downtown Detroit, where Will sells his produce, is the biggest of its kind in America.
Watermelon, salad greens, fresh kale, picked this morning.
And after half an hour, immersed in the amazing vibe of this place, I realize how different this approach to feeding people is from what I've seen on my journey.
Have a wonderful weekend. Picked fresh from a local garden run by my friend Will.
Local, where the food machine is global. Organic, rather than powered by chemistry and genetics. And produced on a grassroots, rather than industrial scale.
I think it's great there are alternative ways that we produce the majority of the fruits and vegetables that Detroiters need to be healthy.
Ashley Atkinson runs Greening of Detroit, a nonprofit that promotes urban farming, not so much as a lifestyle, but as a way for both farmers and customers to thrive.
Local farmers, Michigan farmers, don't have a lot of resources to compete with industrial agriculture. And places like this actually bring together consumers and producers, trying to not only provide, fresh fruits and vegetables to the community, but make a living.
Is it working?
It is working, absolutely. It is even more of a powerful argument for how important urban agriculture is for the city of Detroit.
There's something kind of nice about this reconnection of land and people. And local organic food is reshaping diets, not just here, but all across the country. How far it can ultimately go, however, is open to question. After all, how many small-scale farmers like Will Gardner would it take to supply every one of these food outlets, even if America found craveability in local greens and grass-fed meats? In spite of its problems, our food machine meets this challenge and feeds 300 million Americans every day. I've decided to go back to the heart of that industrial food machine high above the cornfields of Kansas to try and figure out where it's headed. I'm taking a ride with Robert Grace in the Boeing Stearman his dad flew when he started the family crop dusting business after World War II. Between them, father and son have witnessed a revolution.
When you have an increasing population, automatic, you have to have larger and larger yields every year, forever.
The food machine that Robert's dad and Greg Stone's granddad helped create some 70 years ago would be unrecognizable to them today. To sustain us, that machine faces many challenges.
Maintaining this infrastructure we have to pay for that maintenance. So as that canal infrastructure ages, our cost is going to continue to rise.
As our tastes evolve, craveability doesn't have to lead to more bloomin' onions.
Trends are going to change again because now America is moving away from that high-fat diet. So we're going to see all these trends change again.
New voices are growing louder, reviving old ideas.
Something had to be done, and I heard that silent cry for help, and I felt that we have some space out here I can contribute.
For most of the time that humans have walked the earth, the biggest threat to human life was hunger. In 21st century America, our food machine gives us more food than most of us will ever need. But it's not just about producing more calories. The question we now face is, how can we feed ourselves in a way that's healthy for us and sustainable for the environment?
I think the future is very bright for agriculture. These crops we grow today will not look anything like they do now in 5 years. And that's part of the fun, to be part of that.
One thing's for sure. As this revolution continues, our food industry will have to reinvent itself, as it has done so many times before. To keep food on the table, we're counting on it.
America Revealed is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.